Good evening, everyone, and welcome to yet another exciting 27th episode of Season 1 of Shiv Foundation Conversations. I'm Arti Dawar. I head People and Culture at Shiv Schools. Shiv Foundation Conversations is an initiative to inject much needed positivity in our lives and to create ripples of inspiration in these difficult times. In this series, we have hosted leaders from diverse fields who have shared their life lessons with us. Some of the guests were Nobel Prize winner Kailash Satyarthi, badminton champion PV Sindhu, founder and CEO of Zomato Dipinder Goyal, manager of Manchester United Football Club Ole Gunnar, former CEO of Vodafone and internationally acclaimed business leader Arjun Sareen, CMD of HUL Sanjeev Mehta, India's leading fashion entrepreneur Anita Dongre, and Emmy Award-winning wildlife filmmakers Beverly and Derek Jobe. We have so far hosted 26 guests, and their sessions have been seen over 20 million times. We hope that these conversations inspire you and uplift your spirit. Today, we have with us Sahil Barua, the CEO and co-founder of Delhivery, India's leading fulfillment platform for digital commerce. Welcome, Sahil. It's our
Hi,
privilege to have you with us.
hi, Arti. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I'd like to introduce you to our audience. Sahil began his career as a strategy consultant at Bain and Company, working across the London and New Delhi offices. A gold medalist from IIM Bangalore, he started Delivery in 2011 with the vision to become India's top fulfillment platform for digital commerce. Today, Delivery has a nationwide network extending beyond 17,500 pin codes, 2,300 cities, providing a full suite of logistics services, handling more than 1 million consignments per day with over 40,000 employees. Wow, that's incredible, Sahil. Welcome again, and thank you for being with us today. I like to jump straight into our questions, and it'll be good to go back to early years. We know Sahil of IIM Bangalore, NIT graduate, but we would want to know about Sahil before the NIT days. How was your growing up years? One thing you remember the most from your childhood?
Arti, I grew up in the city of Ahmedabad, and I was fortunate to grow up in an academic environment. So I think my father was a professor at IIM Ahmedabad, and my mother's a doctor. And so I think the thing that I remember most from my childhood is growing up sort of on campus at IIM Ahmedabad, and sort of thing that stands out the most is sort of the variety of exposure that I was fortunate to have as a kid, apart from sort of the academic environment of IIM Ahmedabad itself.
Yeah.
So just the ability to play a lot of sports, to be exposed to a lot of interesting conversation, to travel a lot. And sort of as I look back, that exposure is sort of the one thing that has stayed constant over the last 35 years.
Great, great. Ahmedabad is a beautiful city, and I've had the privilege to go and visit IIM Ahmedabad a couple of years back, and it's an incredible, incredible campus. So let's talk about your entrepreneurship leap of faith. You were working with one of the top consulting firms in the world, which for many is a dream career option. Tell us about that drive behind to give it all up, start your own company. What went behind taking up this leap of faith?
Bain was my first job, and I actually started as a summer intern in the London office, and then worked in the Delhi office for a couple of years. I joined consulting largely because I didn't know what to do with my life after getting a business degree. I had no idea. I was a freshly minted mechanical engineer, a freshly minted MBA,
Yeah.
and consulting seemed like it would sort of give me the most diverse options. So honestly, looking back, Bain offered me a job, I took it. It was kind of how it worked out. I enjoyed consulting a lot for 3 years. But I think at that point, two things happened. One is, to be honest, two of my closest friends who also are co-founders of Delhivery, which are
Yeah.
Suraj Saharan and Mohit Tandon, decided that they were going to take a break. and they were evaluating whether to study outside India or not. And the other thing was I realized that I was also a little tired because consulting is sort of, it's like that party you're at where, you're not sure, you really are there because everybody else is and you don't want to leave because you don't know if they'll ever invite you back. And I just realized I was at that stage and I wanted to get to sort of leave. And the driving factor was that, we were very clear that India was going to see a massive internet boom. We worked in telecom at Bain. Suraj and Mohit had quit. We had been talking about this idea, saying, should we actually see if we can build something ourselves, despite having no background. And that's sort of the basic decision framework. We said, okay, I said, look, the two of you are leaving, so I'm also going to quit. And I think we can do something together, and let's look at this whole internet economy and figure out what we can do together. And so for the first 6 months after I left Bain, which was probably, I think, about October 2010, for about the next 6 months, we pretty much just kept bouncing these ideas off of each other and said, look, let's start something. So delivery was not the idea. The idea was just, let's get out there and see what we can do together.
Yeah. Consultings are known to teach all their interns and newbies elevator pitch. Did you also get an exposure on an elevator pitch?
No, unfortunately not. Unfortunately, I think we quit consulting before we got to that stage of the elevator pitch. But the advantage was we spent a lot of time understanding how businesses run and how they function. And so in those 2-3 years, sort of the basic analytical frameworks were there.
Yeah. So why did you choose logistics and a B2B, B2C business in the age of snazzy customer-oriented business for taking this plunge?
Yeah, honestly, looking back after 10 years, I ask myself that question a lot. But I'm kidding. Why did we choose logistics and why not something consumer facing? It's a great question. So two things, really. One is the work we did in telecom. A lot of the work that we did was around understanding telecom networks, was really understanding, how telecom services are delivered. So effectively doing radio frequency planning for telecom, where do the towers go, how does the infrastructure look? And two things that we learned out of that. One was really how critical the back-end infrastructure was to the front-end delivery of the service. For instance, you have low-grade telecom infrastructure. You can't deliver a high-quality voice or data service to consumers. And the second thing that, at least personally, I know that the founders were very passionate about, still are, was the fact that this is a gigantic sort of mathematical optimization kind of problem. It's something that attracted us as engineers, and sort of from the backgrounds that we came in, we said, look, there has to be a better way to do this than has been done over the last 20, 30 years. The story, to test this, Suraj and I tried to send a book to each other, and we used to live opposite each other, literally across the road. Mm-hmm. And there was a logistics company whose office was between the two of us. And so we go to this guy and we say, look, I want to ship this book across the road to Suraj, and how long will it take and how much will you charge us? And he said, well, it's going to be $250 for shipping this book, and I'll deliver it, day after tomorrow. And we said, look, this just doesn't sound right. There has to be a better way to design the entire network. And so that's sort of where the origins of delivery are, and that's how we decided we would do B2B. At that time, nobody was thinking B2B, B2C, at least not a delivery.
Sure.
And from a front-end standpoint, I think we realized our skills weren't there. We were never going to be able to build a great front-end business. The second thing was we realized it would take a long time before these businesses would see their economic models really work out. You really have to take your chances with, will you get funded along the way, how will consumers react and so on. And we said, look, we know from our experience that back-end infrastructure businesses make a lot of money over time. And so that's what we chose to build.
Great. That's very creative. Sending books to each other just to know how much time it takes. So tell us about...
I think one of us was frozen.
Okay. Am I audible to you now?
Yes, you are. Now you're audible.
Okay. So what I was saying was that it was very creative for you and Suraj to courier books to each other just to know how the other business is working. So tell us about the origin of delivery and the brand name. We heard it started over a midnight chat with a food joint owner, and we would love to know more about that chat.
So it did. The name came much later. The idea came much earlier. In terms of the idea itself, we once we had figured out that logistics was what we were largely going to do. Um, the most important question that struck us at that point was who is going to deliver the food, who's going to deliver the boxes that we're going to pick up, and we had no idea how to do that, right? Like because we're just at that point in time, we're just two 25-year-old guys hanging out in an apartment with no job, playing FIFA and trying to figure out how to make a business idea work. And we realized, as we've realized over the last 10 years many times, that the operational steps are often the hardest. And so we said, look, this idea is great, but now how do we deliver this? And so we had ordered food and a guy knocked on the door to deliver it. We just called up a restaurant. And while he was leaving, Suraj, I think, just looked at me and he's like, that guy delivers food. And so, yeah, that guy delivers food. So we said, let's just call him and see, how he does it. And so we called him and then we said, hey, look, how many orders do you deliver every day? Where do you come from? Where do you work? How many other people work there and so on. And I think he got sick of us after 15 minutes. And he said, why don't you just talk to my boss? Don't waste my time. And so we said, okay, where is your boss? He said, this is the restaurant. So we drove up to the restaurant. Fortunately, the owner was there. In a completely different, in a twist of fate, the owner, who was also a good friend, Anuj Bajaj and Amit, they turned out to also have a business in logistics. So they have actually become partners to us in a completely different world. But interestingly, they were shutting down the restaurant. They had a bunch of delivery boys who they were trying to find jobs for. We reached on the exact night that they were deciding to let go of their restaurant. And so we just hired everybody and started delivering. That's really literally how delivery started. So the first couple of days, of course, Suraj and I were also carrying food in our cars and delivering it to people. So that's how we started. In terms of the name, we had no name in mind. For the first 4 months, people would ask us, what do you guys call? And we said, let's just call us the delivery company. And I think one day Suraj was driving to Faridabad for a wedding and the radio in his car wasn't working. And so, by the time he got to Faridabad, I think he had a lot of time to think. So he said, what if we call it delivery with an H? And Mohit and I, we were sort of like, okay, that's fine, but is it a great name? And he's like, do you have anything better? And he said, well, not really. And so we just used the H. And then surprisingly, what happened is people started catching on to it. They would see our riders with the H and they would call up and say, you spelled delivery wrong. And we said, no, we haven't. That's actually the name of the company. And somehow or the other, it just stuck and that's how the brand name evolved.
Wow, that's an incredible story and a good play on the name. So let's demystify delivery for our viewers. Tell us more about the business model, the full scale of operations, the different business units, and how the key revenue streams. How many key revenue streams do you have? Just so that the audience understand the business much better, because it is a complex line of business. Yeah.
The easiest way to demystify delivery is that we move products, right? It's about as simple as it can get, but in a slightly more sophisticated. So that's the elevator pitch. But in terms of a slightly more sophisticated understanding of what we do, I think you have to look at delivery in three ways. You have to look at what it is that we were, what it is that we are, and what it is that we intend to become. We effectively, in our early days and up to for the first couple of years, our ambition was to become the largest parcel delivery company in India. So effectively, every time you bought something online, whether it was on Amazon or on Flipkart or Snapdeal or Paytm or ShopClues or wherever it is, we were the guys who would deliver it to you quickest and fastest. Obviously, from there, we've evolved over the last 10 years, and largely because we knew that after we built the parcel business and built this network that would deliver, we would be able to provide larger set of services, warehousing, freight, and so on. Today, the idea as we stand, delivery today, the ambition is really to be what we call the operating system for commerce. So we do two things. Really, when you look at the delivery flywheel, it's composed of two elements. The first is the logistics network itself, which is where we build large-scale infrastructure, which is class, highly reliable, highly automated, and we're able to reduce the cost at which fulfillment is done, whether it's delivering a parcel, whether it's delivering, a truckload of freight, whether it's warehousing, whatever it is. And so that's sort of the logistics end of the flywheel. And then there's the technology end of the flywheel, which is where we build all of the systems that orchestrate these networks. Increasingly, delivery is shifting from being purely a parcel delivery company to being a sort of a full stack logistics company where we do parcel, freight, warehousing, and cross-border logistics to effectively becoming an orchestrator of networks. So the technology that guides networks and allows companies to take control of their supply chain entirely. So that's sort of delivery. Our major revenue lines are very simple. We have parcel, which is really our e-commerce parcel delivery business, which is about 55% of our total revenue. We do freight services, which is both part truckload and full truckload freight. So part truckload freight, for instance, is if a fashion brand wants to ship out a product to all of their stores across the country, that's an part truckload. Full truckload, for instance, is a factory to a depot kind of movement. So those two put together today will again be about 30 or 35% of our revenue, and the remaining 10% comes from warehousing and cross-border logistics, which we also do. So that's our revenue.
Sure, that's very simply put. It gives a very clear picture. I'm sure our audience would understand the business a lot more now. You've had an incredible path to scale, Sahil. You now complete 1 million consignments a day, 17,000 plus PIN codes, 2,300 cities. What are the key decisions that helped you scale up into a full stack logistics and supply chain firm, which Delhivery is today?
Over 10 years, it's never a couple of key decisions, but a very large number of very small decisions that get you anywhere. But I think if I had to club them into 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 big themes, I think a few decisions that we made, which are particularly stood out. One major decision was to look at the problem not just from an engineering and operational standpoint, but also from a network and technology standpoint. So our network is just fundamentally constructed very differently from regular logistics networks. Regular logistics networks happen to be sort of more hub and spoke, more centralized sort of models, whereas ours is relatively more decentralized. So I think that was really decision one, to say we're going to build a much more decentralized network. The second big decision was really to build every piece of our technology ourselves. So all of our systems have been written from scratch. We had the option, of course, of buying technology and implementing it, but our view was that it was so core to our growth that we had to write every single system from scratch. And so literally right from how do you identify a parcel, how do you ingest it into your system, how do you decide where it goes, how do you track it, how do you measure its weight, and so on. All of that was built in-house. And that in the initial years was a big drag on resources because obviously, we didn't have the scale. But over the long term, it's given us a lot of flexibility. I think the third really was in terms of people and the team. We made a decision pretty early that we would look for a specific kind of team and try to build a specific kind of team. For 2 reasons. Very frankly, we could not afford to hire people from the industry. We didn't have enough money to do that. And so, by choice, we couldn't hire people who came from, UPS or FedEx or Blue Dart or DHL or whatever. But the other was we wanted people who had the ability to not just operate, but also to think about how the network would evolve over time. And the construction of the team, especially in the early years, we're still very proud of the fact that of perhaps the 25 first employees who joined Delhivery, I think maybe 18 or 20 of them are still with the company and spent 8 or 9 years.
Wow.
So I think 3-4 of the key decisions that have helped us over time.
That's a very smart strategy, not bringing in people from competition, because then they don't come with a status quo, right? And they are, open to think outside the box, do things which are unheard of in this sector. So that's a great strategy,
But
I
just
must
to
say.
be clear, a part of that, as with most good strategy, parts of it are pure accident or are forced on
No, but it
you.
worked really well. I think we did that with some of our teams initially, and it breaks the status quo, which is really great to know. This is one of my personal favorite questions. As you know, I head HR, and I love trying to know, what happens inside organizations, and we would like to know about the secret sauce of, consistently delighting the customers in the game of last mile delivery. How have you been able to develop this winning culture among the delivery employees, which helps you strike this win-win combination with all the stakeholders involved? Because it's not easy.
So I can see why it's your favorite question. It's a tough question to answer. Um, so, I don't have a definitive answer, but let me try to tell you at least how we think about it, the philosophy behind it. So two things guide us very clearly. The first is that our belief is that culture is what you do rather than what you say. Uh,
Hmm.
and so when you look at our team, again, partly in the beginning because of lack of choice and over time because of experience, we spend a lot of time actually operating, even today. For instance, I was just talking to Kapil, who's our CTO and co-founder. Kapil was
Hmm.
sitting out of facilities in Delhi. He's sitting in our Delhi airport facility and working out of there. Um, it's common across our entire senior team that we actually do spend a lot of time on the ground operating ourselves. And so, as a consequence, that sort of bled through the entire team.
Hmm.
What that's done is that I think most of the operational management at delivery is not arm's length and it's not theoretical. It's very
Hmm.
real. There's a lot of time on the ground. What it also allows us to do is to understand every part of the operation much better. So we've delivered so many shipments. I think Suraj and I have probably delivered 5-digit number of shipments to people across the country and in many
Hmm.
cities, Delhi, Bangalore, Bombay, Chennai. And so we are able to understand to some extent what goes on the ground and how various stakeholders within the company think. So that's helped guide culture to a large extent. If you look at our teams, one is the fact that we keep them together for very long periods of time. In general, our attrition has been low. And B, it's the ability to go on the ground and actually see what's happening, in front of you. I can assure you that the easiest way to excite somebody about our business is to take them to, one of our large facilities,
Yeah.
and you can watch hundreds of thousands of packages move in and out, and people have just never seen something like that before. Ownership that creates the ability to see the impact of your work, which is what people want to do. That creates a sense of real participation
Hmm.
in our operations. So I think that's helped guide culture for sure.
Hmm.
And I think, hey Arti, I think we've lost you again. Yeah,
I,
sorry.
I can hear you, Sahil. I can hear you.
So I think one was that, which is that we've tried to be as hands-on as we possibly can be, and the second, to be honest, is I think our customers, frankly, have driven our culture to a large extent as well. The
Sure.
reality at a million parcels a day, even if we are, and on good days, we are 98% accurate. On bad days, for instance, during COVID, we've been 75% accurate. If
Hmm.
you're 2% inaccurate with a million parcels a day, you are making 20,000 people unhappy every
Yeah.
single day. And so,
Yeah.
to a large extent, in our business, the reality is our culture is also driven by the fact that every day we know we are going to make 20,000 people unhappy and we
Hmm.
just have to figure out how to get better. So it's what I think Bezos calls the divine dissatisfaction of the customer. And so I think that does help guide us as well.
Yeah, but I think it's incredible at senior level, the capacity to go hands-on, look at from 3,000 feet and go back to 30,000 feet, where you look at big picture. I think uh, it's pretty incredible, I would say. So I think, Sahil, we can hear you, but your video is frozen.
Uh, one
But
second.
I think we can hear you very clearly.
Let me just stop and restart my video, and maybe that'll help.
Sure. Yeah. Yes.
Does it work?
Yeah. So that brings me to our next question. Let's talk about use of data and technology to transform the business. And in one of your interviews, you mentioned how delivery is using technology to, make it motorbike-borne couriers far more efficient by assigning them smaller areas than the usual norm and providing them precise addresses by using digital maps. So tell us how this data analytics is radically transforming the industry, in various ways from delivery's perspective.
Arti, just give me a sec. I'll just refresh the page. I think your team has just asked me to refresh the page because it's
Yes,
stuck.
I think the video is frozen again.
Give me a minute. Hi, is this better?
Yes, yes.
All right.
So did you catch my last question? Okay.
So, look, technology and data are absolutely core to what we do. Like I said, we chose to build absolutely all of our systems from scratch. So, I think why if you look at logistics historically, logistics has been an industry that was driven entirely by industrial engineering. The design of networks, the design of facilities. When you look back at the glory days of FedEx and UPS and DHL, these are absolute modern marvels of industrial engineering. There's no question. Brilliantly designed companies. But I think when you look at what's changed over the last 8 or 10 years, it's really the ability to ingest vast amounts of data and to be able to move towards a more real-time decision-making framework, a more real-time sort of company. Traditional models in industrial engineering are designed around standard operating procedures and they're designed around sort of the averages.
Yeah.
Whereas what we realized very quickly is that logistics is a real-time business. The other thing that we, of course, realized is that consumer expectations were changing very, very fast. Right? If you go back 10 years, if someone told you your parcel would come in 5 days, you would be okay with that. But today, the consumer finishes. I mean, I do it myself. I just bought something on Amazon. I checked out, of the cart, and I'm immediately trying to track it and see where it is, and when is it going to arrive. And so I think we realized that the ability to process that data was critical to us. Once we realized that, you have to build all your technology to actually support that. You don't have an alternative. And so in that sense, that's how data and tech become core to us. And we identified 3 or 4 critical problems, which to this date, we still treat them as unsolved problems at delivery. One is location, which is, how much do we know about the location of where we're picking up from and where we're delivering to? The second is the network architecture itself. How do we identify what paths we should take? So, if it's, let me give you an example. In December, if it's foggy in Delhi and you pick up shipments which have to go to Bangalore, what's the fastest way to get there? Delhi might not be the fastest way to get there. You might be better served flying out of Jaipur or flying out of Chandigarh, if possible. What happens if Chandigarh breaks down? Where do you go next? And so, building that sense of data optimization was number 2 for us. Third is the identity of the consumer himself or herself, which is, are you someone we've been transacting with frequently? Which means, can I, as delivery, know that you, Arti, are at work between 9 and 5 p.m. at location X, and you also have a home address where you're available on Saturday and Sunday, and can we make sure that we deliver, to your preferences? And so, these 3 core data sets, and the fourth obviously being the product itself. What is it that we're delivering to you? Are we delivering, an iPhone 10, which is an iPhone 11 now, which is, far more expensive to deliver, or are we delivering, a T-shirt, which is 500 rupees, and how we treat those then becomes different. And so that's how we use data and technology. We try to identify location, consumer identity, what product we're carrying, how it gets routed, and then just relentlessly keep optimizing it again and again and again.
Yeah. And technology is the key, in today's era. There must have been many key challenges when you started in 2011 versus now. And looking at it retrospectively in terms of the ups and downs, what are the few key challenges that you faced while starting up compared to the challenges that you face now that Delivery has matured into a full stack logistics company?
Hey, Arti, I think, again,
Yeah, we
one
can
of
hear
us is
you, but
frozen.
I can hear you, Sahil,
I'm
but
not
I
sure
think
if it's me.
your screen is frozen, but I can hear you.
Okay, great. I'm not sure whether I got the question entirely.
Yeah, so
Um,
you're okay now. Yes.
all right. So, key challenges when we were starting. Um, Everything was a key challenge when we were starting. But the two or three biggest ones that I remember, the hardest one was trying to get people excited about this business. And I don't mean investors alone, right? I mean, we have to build a team. We have to, we are ultimately logistics. We employ 30,000 people. And so, getting 30,000 people together itself in the beginning, getting 100 people together was very hard.
Yeah.
And even though we were able to get, people to deliver on bikes and people to deliver in vans and so on, building a management team was really hard in 2011 because, it's not like in 2011 you could walk into IIT Delhi and say, you guys should come and join this fledgling logistics company and it is great. So I think getting talent was hard. The environment for logistics in India was complicated. It had been a blue collar industry for the longest time. Only now has it sort of become a lot more sexy where people want to actually come and work here.
Hmm.
So that's one. The second, obviously, was after the first year and a half, we bootstrapped for about 18 months. But after that, raising capital was hard because the reality was, and I understand completely why. I mean, if you were a venture capitalist, were you really going to give, a couple of 26-year-olds, a couple of $1 million of cash to go and build a logistics company? So I get the skepticism, and even though we didn't like it at the time, but it was hard to raise capital. The third thing, of course, is that India is just a hard place to do business. It's a very, very complicated market that I think people underestimate a lot. The
Hmm.
reality is that we have Byzantine regulations. We have at that point we didn't have GST, and so every state had completely different laws. And just trying to figure out how to manage a business in each of these locations. I mean, you go to Bombay and you have to deal with at that time Octroy. You have to deal with Mathadis. You couldn't come
Hmm.
in Thane into Bombay. Now for us, this was just in your normal life as a consumer, you never deal with this. You sort of just assume that your toothpaste arrives, the way it always does, but it's a complicated chain of events.
Yeah.
And I think those were our early challenges, really just getting used to the complexity of the market we were in. Today, our challenges are very different. I think today our challenges, the market still remains challenging. India is, if anything, I would argue a more complex market to do business in today than it was, when we started out in 2011. Some things have eased, of course. For
Hmm.
instance, the adoption of technology and GST have been net positives for sure. But we still remain a country which is so vastly difficult to work in. Regulation is still complicated. The country itself always has something or the other going on. And the operational complexity of our business is massive. For instance, right now Bombay is underwater. Uh,
Hmm.
how do you pass trucks into Bombay? How do you get things to people? And it's not like you don't need them. And the other part what's been challenging, honestly, very frankly, from our standpoint, is the fact that you know, I think consumer expectations have run far beyond the capabilities that all of us have been able to build in this period. It's like I said, at 98% service levels is not good enough, and there's always this struggle to say, how hard do you push on the 2% that you're failing on, and so it's been a challenge for us to continuously upgrade our systems, to continuously upgrade our processes, while dealing with the operational complexity of the country, and then trying to communicate that with the consumer. I mean, for instance, every day today we have people who call us up and say, "Where is my package?" And
Hmm.
live in the city and it hasn't come. And it's hard to explain to them that there was a coronavirus related shutdown in the previous hub, because of which your parcel is going to be delayed by 5 days and so on. And I think for us to upgrade our communication with the consumer, for us to with our clients, and to
Hmm.
build a brilliant network, that's our biggest challenge right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a very complex way. Every city comes with its own compliances. I can understand how difficult it must be to maneuver all that. And look at, I have new respect for uh, the consignments which get delivered to us, and the hard work which goes behind it. So we were looking at a Niti Aayog report that pegged the Indian logistics sector at a USD 160 billion, and is expected to grow to about 215 billion in 2 years. With such a staggering growth path predicted, do you see delivery taking a leadership role towards driving that growth for the sector?
I mean, absolutely. That is pretty much why we exist. But a couple of things. I think one is that the logistics market in India, the size of it is, it's not appropriate to look at it the same way. The reason why the logistics industry in India is large is because India is inefficient, not because at this point there's as much demand for $160 billion of logistics spend. Truth be told, that $160 billion should probably look more like $100 billion. The $60 billion is really the cost of inefficiency, because traditionally logistics, the issue has been there have been too many intermediaries and costs have been too high. Fundamental infrastructure has not been particularly great. So from our standpoint, the market is large. It's very interesting, absolutely. Coronavirus notwithstanding. Our view is very simple. It's not going to be one delivery that is going to
Yeah.
go out and win this market. It's $100 billion market. I think there's going to be 5, 6, 8, 10 different companies which are going to get created or which are already there and which are going to grow into this market. What's going to change though is the way we do it. The way we did it in the past is not going to be the way that our customers and our clients are going to demand that we deliver our services in the future. It's
Yeah.
going to be a massive upgradation of infrastructure. It's going to be massive build out of capacity, upskilling and training of people. Making this a technology enabled business. These are the things that we think will change. We hope that we will. I'm very confident that we will have our place in that group, whatever that group might be. The
Hmm.
challenge for us though is just to keep meeting expectations of clients and customers.
Absolutely, and as you very rightly said, that COVID has impacted every industry and every individual at this point in time, and COVID and the induced lockdown sort of put the brakes on the logistics sector, and with a report citing movements of truck falling by up to 90-95% in the initial days, as barring just essential goods, there were restrictions on everything else. So, how has the industry responded to the challenge? Has the recovery been swift or slow off the blocks? Do you see a definite pivot towards digital? Towards the digital for the industry in this crisis?
The recovery is going to go through many phases. There certainly has been a phase of recovery since sort of the first week of May, after the initial sort of the first month and a half where there was complete lockdown. The first
Hmm.
month and a half, I think, was really just about getting medical supplies in place, making sure that PPE, drugs, and so on are all available. The grocery supply chain is working so that people can adjust to a longer period of sort of being separated socially. The last 2 or 3 months, I think, and the next probably 3 to 6 months are going to be about consumers and businesses adjusting to this reality. If you ask me, frankly, I don't think, for instance, that the traditional ways of doing business or the traditional sort of, we all go to the market and we all shop a certain way. I don't think that's going to happen for the next 3 to 6 months. And we're all going to have to adjust to this. From a
Hmm.
industry standpoint, it's obviously forced us to think more and more about how to bring efficiency into our operations. Because today, if we had 200 people at a facility, now
Hmm.
we got to think about how do you do it with 120? Because only then can you meaningfully impose, the distancing that you need to be able to work safely. It's forced us to treat safety as an extremely important parameter. It's not like none of us tracked it before. But now it's really sort of become absolutely core. And, if you don't manage safety, you could have one guy who shows up with coronavirus and is asymptomatic, and your entire facility, is shut down. So I think that's a welcome change. It will increase the cost at which we operate, but at the same time, I think it will make us more resilient. And then the ultimate recovery, to be honest, I think we're pretty far away. We're really going to see phases of this. So the logistics industry as a whole, is it depressed? I think so, yes.
Yeah.
At this point, it's going through the same sort of recovery cycle that we're seeing across the broader economy. But what I think will happen is whatever emerges at the end of this will be higher quality, more resilient, more organized, sort of more transparent than it's been in the past. So, like with all shocks, there's a negative now, hopefully for a positive, 6 months down the line.
Yeah, true. I read that through your expansive delivery network and on ground coordination with local authorities, you've been able to deliver COVID related relief material and support to lots of trucking partners and drivers. And tell us about the work that you have been doing with the local communities to get them back on track.
So we split our response into a couple of different sort of verticals per se. The first was really we said, look, if the world is going to expect doctors, and nurses and hospital staff to be at the hospitals, then obviously the pharmaceuticals industry and people who are manufacturing PPE are going to need logistics services, and therefore we are as much at the front line as anybody else is. And so the first part of our engagement was really engaging with. We basically put out a thing saying any hospital, anybody, anywhere, if you need us to deliver PPE to you, if you need us to ship drugs to you,
Hmm.
just go and we'll figure out how to do it. And so we had a lot of hospitals reaching out. We had a lot of local authorities, district magistrates reaching out, the police reaching out in a lot of cases, saying, look, we have 20 cases of PPE which need to be picked up from somewhere and dropped over here. Can you go and get it? And so we would go and get those and keep the lines running. The second was really empowering the police themselves and the local
Hmm.
authorities. So because we were working with them so closely on getting permissions to operate and so on, we said, look, you guys are as much at risk as we are. And so we actually, the PPE and the masks and the sanitizers and everything else that we were bringing for ourselves and for our teams to operate, we were making sure that we were dispatching those to police stations all over the country saying, this is from us, you guys also be safe, we'll be safe. And, let's try and figure out how to operate. So that was really part two in terms of engaging with the community. And the third for us then was all our major facilities are whether in Bhiwandi or in or in Bilaspur or in Tauru in Gurgaon or in Socket Road in Bangalore or wherever, was really we have large local communities that support our operations there because a lot of our staff comes from there. And
Hmm.
we started doing again distribution of PPE, distribution of masks and sanitizers, um, food camps wherever we could. We were fortunate enough, I think, to partner with a couple of NGOs around the country. So we would make sure that food was available, grains distribution was happening. In the larger scheme of things, that's a very small response, and so our community response in that sense was limited to that. But the first two really was, I think, where our focus was. How do we get equipment to doctors and nurses who are on the front line? How do we get equipment to the police who are also on the front line alongside us, and how do we maintain safety within our community?
Yeah.
Then out of that, see, the other thing is our own community is very large. With
Hmm.
30,000 employees at Delivery, we have another probably 30,000 indirect partners. So when you look at it in terms of families, that's nearly 300,000 people. And so our other big initiative was just keeping these 300,000 people safe, making sure that their jobs are safe, making sure that their insurance is paid for, making sure if they fall ill, we're keeping track of them, sending them supplies if we need to. And I think for the large part, we were able to do that.
That's really heartening to know. That's I think all of us at our levels are trying to help extend ourselves beyond. So that was really great and humbling to hear. I like to now talk about relationship with the founding partners. So Delivery has 5 co-founders. How has the journey been with all of them? How does each one of you fit into the scheme of things to drive this so well-oiled engine? Give us some juicy stories.
There really aren't any. When we started out, Suraj, Mohit, and I have known each other half our lives. And so as co-founders, we were friends first and, partners in the business second. I think that's been the key. For each of us, the reality is that we've gone through our personal and our professional ups and downs over 10 years. But we've had the privilege of working with each other all throughout. So there aren't as many juicy stories, to be honest, because most of our time has been spent arguing about how to deliver shipments
Yeah.
and how to deliver them. But suffice to say, what we decided was that we would try and make decisions together as much as possible. And I think my co-founders at that point, smartly now in retrospect, said that I would have the casting vote if they disagreed. And so, which meant over time that I became the villain, which, which I guess worked well. But I can tell you that the secret to it is to have good co-founders, and that's just how we survive. I think the great people, and it's been a privilege.
Great. So I'm sure there must be scenarios when you're playing good cop, bad cop, to get things going in the organization. But great to know the camaraderie which the founding partners have. We have lots and lots of audience questions coming in. So maybe I'll take a few before I go on asking. Lots of people are asking how to join Delhivery.
That's nice to know. How do you join Delhivery? Just write to CEO@delhivery.com. Or reach out to Kapil Bharti or to me or to Mohit or to Suraj or to Sandeep Barasia, who's the Chief Business Officer. Just reach out to any of us and we'll get in touch.
Okay. You want to give them any secret questions you ask for them to qualify for interviews? Maybe some of them can prepare.
I think I noticed that somebody had asked this question, which is, what do we look for when we interview people?
Yes.
I think the one or two things that we certainly look for. One is just good sound business judgment in general, not specific to logistics, not specific to any industry. Just sound business judgment. What is, for instance, as an example, what do you think of e-commerce in India? What do you think of logistics in India? Where do you think money can be made in this industry? How do you make money in these various businesses? And I think that separates people, a deep curiosity and intelligence towards how businesses are run. The second thing that at least I personally look for a lot is very clear communication. So just being very clear about why you come to meet us, what is it that you want to do, why do you want to join Delhivery is usually a good question. And I feel like the people who give the most honest answers are the ones who do well at Delhivery, who we like to hire at Delhivery. So good, clear communication. Why do you want to join Delhivery? And I guess the first one really being a general curiosity for business and the ability to understand various models.
Sure. Rohan wants to know, did you have a near-death moment in your startup when you felt that you will have to shut down operations? How did you deal with it?
Yeah, man, Rohan, we have had more near-death experiences than I can remember in this business, and sometimes literally so. We have nearly run out of capital out of our own stupidity, where we underestimated the amount of working capital that we would need. And so while it was doing well, we didn't have enough cash. And we really struggled to meet payroll. This is 7 years ago, but a lesson that we've never forgotten. Obviously, our volumes have gone through their cycles over the years. And in 2015, I remember when the e-commerce industry went through a mini slump, we ended up with a large asset base with relatively not enough volume. And so the economics of the business looked terrible. And we were worried, if we hadn't raised capital pretty soon after, we would have been in pretty deep trouble overall as a business. We've had infrastructure breakdown, we've had truck accidents, we've had coronavirus, demonetization, GST, weather-related events. So near-death experiences in an operations business are sort of daily.
Yeah. Great. So Srilata wants to know, you say you want to be the operating system for digital commerce. So does that mean you are looking to expand to space beyond logistics? Yes,
but again, related to the fundamental idea of commerce. And say commerce, a large part of what we mean is physical commerce, which is the exchange of goods across the world. So Today, we are a large logistics company and also do a lot of technology. I think over the next couple of years, we'll be doing a lot more on the technology front, which is really building out our logistics platform, bringing on more networks, orchestrating them. We will also look to expand to other countries with our logistics and technology services, but we will fundamentally be rooted in physical commerce and in the movement of physical commerce. That's, so, in that sense, always anchored in logistics to some extent.
Sure, sure. Latif wants to know, what is your advice on fundraising for young entrepreneurs? One hears different point of view on whether one should raise funds or should just build slowly.
Yeah, I'll give you my favorite consulting answer, which is that it depends. I, yeah, first of all, I always find it a little, our experience is not large enough to be prescriptive in any fashion. I think raising capital is extremely important. I think it's an extremely important skill set to have. It's an extremely important thing for every business to be able to do because it's ultimately what allows you to scale up. I think the right time to raise capital is when you have a complete understanding of why you need it. And which means being able to prove the business model to a point where you're completely familiar with it. Like, for instance, I can only speak from Delivery's example. If I remember the first round of capital that we raised, we had decided that we would not build a second delivery center until we got the first delivery center perfectly right. And so, week after week, for months on end, we would just go to the same delivery center and try the same things again and again and again and again. This is despite the fact that we had the money to set up, multiple cities and set up multiple delivery centers. The advantage was that when we did want to raise capital, if I look at our pitch deck from 2012 and I look at our pitch deck from 2020, we did absolutely everything that we said we would do, from 2012 to 2020. And the economics of the business followed that. And so raising that capital became easier. So as an entrepreneur, perhaps the right answer is raise capital when you're completely clear about how your business is going to pan out. If you get that clarity early, outstanding. If it takes a while for you to get that clarity, maybe good idea is to raise it a little later because the last thing you want is to have a conflict between your investors and you in terms of whether.
Correct. That's really a very good advice. Tanushree Sinha wants to know, do you give internship to school students?
Well, we haven't yet, but I don't see why we shouldn't. So
Super.
please
So
reach out.
we'll have
Yeah.
some people reach out to you.
Sure, absolutely.
Right. So, from a personal perspective, given a chance to travel back in time, would 25-year-old Sahil do anything differently, or he's happy with the way things have panned out?
I don't feel I'm old enough to be able to look back and give myself advice at 25. I think the only thing that I would go back in time and remind myself is perhaps over time I've developed a shorter temper than I would have liked to. And I think what I would tell myself at 25 perhaps now is to say that, it's all right, keep the faith, it will all work out in the end. It's a long journey and you tend to sort of lose perspective of that every once in a while. And I think I certainly have over the last 10 years several times. And I think the advice I would give myself is to just remind myself to calm down, center myself, and be less stressed about things. Easy for me to say today, to be honest.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Great. So, how do you typically describe a typical day in Sahil's life? Because it's pretty much a 24/7 business, and I'm sure it's a job which pretty much keeps you awake at night. So, what's a typical day in Sahil's life?
Yeah, there isn't one. To be honest, 3 months back, we were worried about COVID. We're still worried about COVID. In the last week, we've been worried about floods in Bombay. I'm pretty sure in another month, we're going to be worried about something else. But if I some kind of order, I guess a typical day is I start reasonably early most days. Uh, a large part of the day is really spent reviewing operations and reviewing the economics of the business with various members of the team. I try to spend about 20% of my time also working with our technology and product teams, trying to understand how we're building for the future. Um, Not always effectively. Sometimes I think they resent my participation, but at least I force it on them, I guess. And the remaining 30% is relatively freewheeling, which is it sort of gives me time to just react to whatever is happening on that day or in that week because it really could be anything at all. And other than that, I think one out of swimming, cycling, or running
Yeah.
is there on a daily basis.
Yeah, self-reflection and spending time with yourself is very, very important. Keeping in view it's a 24/7
Yeah.
business, and your brain must be at all time thinking about everything, right? So for all our budding entrepreneurs who are eager to catch some pearls of wisdom from you, what are the key three success mantras you would want to give them?
I think the first one, if I had to put anything out, the first one is be decisive. Always. Over time, as businesses become more complex, decisions become more complex. What's important is to evaluate deeply, decide, and then commit, and then do that cycle again and again. For the largest part, I think as companies get larger, we all struggle with the speed of decision making. When you're 10 people in a garage making a decision is very easy and you can reverse it, tomorrow morning. But as you get larger, the ability to make decisions is harder. And so I would say decide frequently and always base your thinking on decisions. The reason I say that is because decision making is a muscle, just like everything else. And so the more decisions you make, the better you get at making them. And a large part of running a business, at least to me, seems to be making decisions. And so I think that's advice number one. Never lose your focus on exercising your decision muscle and always thinking, what would I do? And then evaluate, decide, move on. But really, the only other fundamental principle that I can think of is people look at businesses and they say, you read all these stories and you get a feeling that there's always been a magic moment at which time a business just, becomes valuable and becomes large and so on. But I think Rohan asked that question, and it's a great question. I think we've all had near-death experiences. We've all had, difficult times. And very often, at least the role of the senior management team at a company is to make the least bad decision out of a set of horrible choices. And at those times, it can be very difficult to maintain perspective. So I'd say my second big piece of advice is just don't give up. If you started a business and you and your team are there, you're in charge of it, you've done this, you know this best, things will get better. They get, so just don't give up. Keep thinking, keep deciding, keep trying to get things right every day, and over time, I think we just can deal with it.
Great. I think all of us can use that advice. So, Sahil, are you ready for a rapid fire?
Sure. I don't know how well I'll perform, but I'll try.
So, I don't have more questions. I have 6 questions for you in rapid fire. So, I will quickly ask the question, whatever comes to your mind, one word. So, let's fire. Toughest moment as an entrepreneur?
Losing one of our first hires.
Stress bursting mechanism?
Triathlon.
What keeps you awake at night?
Undelivered shipments.
What makes you sleep comfortably?
Delivered shipments.
Why am I not surprised? Which entrepreneur outside India do you admire the most?
I've got two. On a serious note, I think one is Beyonce. I think she's incredible. But outside of that, I think in sort of the more regular business world, Jeff Bezos.
Okay. One key skill that you look for while hiring?
Communication. Excellent communication.
Great. I think we could maybe wind up by one last viewer question, and this is from Manish. You have been able to preempt upcoming trends in e-commerce and logistics industry. How does one hone such skills?
Uh, we've had a team which evaluates things a lot. I mean, they think a lot. We spend a lot of time as individuals and as a team thinking about our business. We don't take it for granted. At least I like to believe that we don't take it for granted. And so that allows us to see. Our fundamental question is always, why can't we do this a different way, even if we've done it 10 times before? And it's always the question is still, anybody can get up and say, well, why can't you do this differently? Or why can't we add this new business, or why can't we service these new customers? And I think we've been able to create a reasonably safe space for those ideas, and somewhat enough freedom for people to be able to try out and execute those. And that's perhaps how we've been able to preempt things. But it's only been 10 years, so it's hard to say.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Sahil, for being so open and transparent and for sharing your journey with us. This has been truly, truly inspiring. I enjoyed our conversation a great deal. And I'm sure everybody who logged in for this session found their own set of learnings from your immensely successful journey. And it has been a true honor to host you today at Shiv Foundation Conversations. And thank you so much for your time today. And I wanted to remind all our viewers that this conversation will continue to be available at the Shiv Foundation's Facebook page in case you would like to come back to it another time. And thank you, Sahil. It was lovely chatting with you.
Thank you for having me. You've been a great host today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.